Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Everton Robinson. We'll be discussing his wonderful book, A Child's Guide to Wisdom, available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. But guys, listen, if you want to gather everything that Everton has to offer, do yourself a favor and head directly to his personal site. And that's A Child's Guide to Wisdom.net. There, you'll be able to find more information on Everton himself, more information on this fantastic narrative, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing page. So one more time, that's A Child's Guide to Wisdom.net. Everton was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business. Author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact ARP. And you can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Everton here on the line. Now, the moment you go to his Amazon page, Barnes & Noble, his personal website, A Child's Guide to Wisdom.net, and you start to do any research on his book, you're instantly going to understand what we're going to discuss today. Now, it's a self-help / educational narrative. Now, it's built and constructed as a tool for parents to pass on wisdom to their children. So it's going to be a self-help, step-by-step guide that's incorporated, that Everton has created himself. And listen, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm not going to steal his thunder. And not only am I not going to steal his thunder, but also Everton created the book. Okay, he's done the research, he's put it together, and he's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could anyway. But what I'm really looking forward to with this, guys, right there in the title, that one word, wisdom. It's so profound, right? And we understand that when you get to a certain age, through the adversity and the experiences that you've had, wisdom is derived, right? Wisdom will get accumulated through those experiences. Well, what I love about this book is, guys, it doesn't always have to be your particular experience that wisdom is derived from. This book is going to teach parents, and really anybody that is willing to listen, on how to translate that wisdom to the child without the child actually having to go through all of those experiences themselves. I absolutely love that. There's so much value in the book that Everton has put together. And like I said, he's the expert. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Everton, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest with us today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, we're very much looking forward to this, and we're really looking forward to the words of wisdom that we're going to be able to receive from you today, as well as the words that you've put within the confines of the book. Now, I know we have so much information to cover, Everton, so let's hold off slightly, though, before jumping into the book. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
I am originally from Panama, so if you hear an accent, that's what you're hearing. My parents were from Jamaica and Barbados, and they went to Panama to help in the building of the Panama Canal. So I've been here in the United States for a number of years. My background, I got a degree in business administration, became a CPA right out of college, did that for a while, then became a controller in the banking business, did that for a few years, and now I'm an entrepreneur. Working on my own, and I am a registered representative with a Series 7 license and a Series 66 license. So I help people to invest their retirement funds so that they can live on it for the rest of their life. That's basically what I do.
Everton, listen, man, we're going to have to invite you back onto the network, not to discuss this book in further detail, not to discuss any other books you write in the future moving forward, but just to discuss your background, man, because my goodness, it is so eclectic, so impressive, and I'm sure you have stories for days, man, and we would love to hear them. So we'll set that up. We'd love to have you back onto the network. Everton, without further ado, though, because, of course, the anchor for today's meeting is all about a child's guide to wisdom. So without further ado, tell us a little bit more about your narrative.
Well, thank you very much. Now, here's what happened. Around the age of 32, I attended a seminar, and the speaker said that her father was a colonel in the Army, and the father was constantly teaching them principles of character building principles. And she said that periodically her father would examine them and tell them, ask them about different principles that he had taught them, and he evaluated them. And I thought, wow, if I had something like that when I was a child, I would make way better choices than I've made. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I decided from now on, I'm going to learn the principles of wisdom. And when I have children, I'm going to teach them these principles from the time they can speak. Because I learned that children learn as much as their parents think they can learn. If the parents think they can learn a lot, the child learns a lot. If the parents say, oh, no, they're too young, they're too small, whatever, then the child doesn't learn as much. So I said, whenever my children can speak, I'm going to make sure that I teach them these principles of wisdom. Well, I had twin girls. And when at the age when they were around 3 years of age, we were watching The Lion King video, and they were saying verbatim every word that was being spoken in the movie. And I said, okay, it's time. If they can do that, then they can learn these principles. And so the thing about my girls is they always wanted my time. They always wanted me to read them a story. So since I was a captive audience anyway, I said, okay, during story time, I'll read you a story, but I'm also going to teach you these principles. And so every time I would read them a story before they went to bed at night, I would drill them on a principle over and over again. I would say, repeat after me. Wisdom is knowing what to do, and they'll repeat it, and doing what and doing when you're supposed to do it, and knowing what not to do and not doing it. So back and forth we would go before I would read them a story. So that became a part of our routine. And then later on, as we would be driving around, they would be in the back seat, I'd be in the front seat, and I'd be drilling them, always asking them questions. What is this? What is that? So by the time they were 7, 8 years old, they knew all these principles. And these principles became like guardrails for them. So now I have they look like identical twins. The doctor said that they're not, but I think they are. And they could get in a lot of trouble. But their consciences were so alive because they had learned these principles that they never got in trouble. We didn't have a lot of problems with them. And, children are curious, and so they would always try to get away with stuff. But as far as just normal upbringing, we didn't have any problems with them because those principles were there as guardrails. Whenever we wanted to correct them, we would ask them, well, what is this principle? And they'll tell us what the principle is. And then we say, okay, now, are you doing that? Or, if they were violating a principle, we would ask them the principle and then ask them, if they were following the principle. And we told them all the time, you are wise because I'm teaching you the words of wisdom. And so when they would go with their friends and their friends would get in trouble, they would never get in trouble because their consciences were alive because of the principles. And now I was speaking to my daughter this morning. She's now 29, and we're talking about the book, and she said she was talking to a friend of hers, and her friend was saying, oh, he never thought about anything he did. He just did whatever he did. Never thought about it in terms of right or wrong. And she said, but I couldn't do that, because every time we try to get off track, we would always have to come back because of the principles that we had learned. Mm-hmm. So the repetition is key. People sometimes they buy the book and they put it on the shelf where it's not going to do any good. It is for the parent who is going to be a captive audience anyway to their child to use it to teach the principle and back and forth and back and make a game out of it. But at the end of the day, the child will have absorbed that principle and become a part of their thinking.
I love it. I love it. Listen, Everton, this is not where I wanted to initially go with this, but after that description, how could I go anywhere else? I mean, I have to go here now. Listen, you're talking about these principles of wisdom, right? So, listen, you're just dangling the fruit in front of our face. I mean, listen, I have to ask. First and foremost, how many principles are we talking about here? And if you could, to give us a little bit more of a teaser, a little more of an incentive of what to expect when we pick up the book, what are some of those principles of wisdom?
So the first one I taught them is the principle of wisdom. The principle of wisdom is knowing what to do and doing it when you're supposed to do it, and knowing what not to do and not doing it. So when I taught them that, the idea is for them to be able to discern between right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first principle I taught them. And then I taught them knowledge is having the information you need to do what you're supposed to do. So I made it very simple, in very simple language, so that they could learn it and they could understand it. Courage is doing what you're supposed to do even when you are afraid to do it. Transparency, being the same person you are in public that you are in private. So let's see what other ones. Giving. Mm-hmm. Giving is willingly letting another person have what belongs to you.
You know, Everton, curiosity from myself. So we know about your inspiration for yourself embarking upon this journey with your twin daughters, as you stated. Now, it very easily could have just stayed something that you had taught them, and something that stayed within your family, and something that you verbally told those around you. But you didn't end it there, Everton. You took it a step further. You put the words to the page, and you put the book out for the public to partake in as well. What inspired you to do that, and what did you recognize about the words you were putting on the page that made you feel that this was something that was truly valuable to any parent that would pick up your book?
Good question. What inspired the book was my wife saw me teaching these principles to the children. And she said, why don't you write a book? I hadn't thought about writing a book. I was just interested in getting the information to my children. Mm-hmm. But she said, you should write a book. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, that's a good idea. And so I wrote a book. And one of the other things that I thought about is I want wisdom to be attractive to the children. I want the children to feel that if I'm wise, I'm going to succeed. And so I connected wisdom to money. And so what I did is I built in an incentive process in which each time they quoted the principle from memory, I would initial on each page I have the numbers from 1 to 21. And the idea is I learned that if you repeat something 21 times, usually you would form a habit. And so on each page I put the principle, I put the definition, then I number from 1 to 21. And each time they quoted the page, the principle from memory, I initial one of those numbers and I gave them some money. And so by doing it that way, they would now be able to link wisdom with money, with success. And so we decided that we would not give them allowance, but anytime they needed money or wanted money, they would have to quote principles to us. And so my wife and I started to do that. And so we put that into the book. And so the book consists of the 50 principles. On each page, there is 1 to 21. At the bottom is a certification. We are making wisdom important. So we gave them a certificate when they quoted it 21 times and gave them a bonus. So on each page of the book, when we're discussing the principles, that's what is on each page. I don't have a whole lot of other discussion aside from that, because I want the focus to be memorization of the principle and rewarding them for memorizing the principle, thus giving wisdom importance in their lives. Mm-hmm. The objective is that wisdom will become a way of life for them, that they would make that decision. And both my daughters have.
I love it. I love it. Listen, people, let me break this down for you. A couple of things that were just absolutely incredible what Everton just said. First and foremost, associating each of these steps or each of these principles of wisdom and finding a proper incentive to learn them. Now, in this instance, with his daughters, it was a financial incentive. It could vary based upon the individual, but having that incentive there will continue to make them really engaged in wanting to learn, because they know that reward is at the end of it, right? It's at the opposite side of it. So that was amazing in and of itself, and a very creative thing that you did there, Everton. But let me tell you, even better than that, you see how he quickly dropped in the fact that it was his wife's doing that pushed him in the direction of writing the book. People, let me tell you something. What's the old expression? Behind every good man is an even better woman, or behind every strong man is an even stronger woman. Listen, this holds true, okay? Women just... listen, they're a blessing, aren't they? I mean, the way that they just keep us on track and push us in our direction that we didn't even know we were supposed to be going in. Everton he's like, I didn't even realize I needed to write a book. And it was his wife's doing. This is a smart man. I promise you, he's been married for a long time, and he's a very successful marriage. By the way, he just dropped in that little note there for his wife. Good job, Everton. I love what you're doing here, man. Guys, again, here on the line with Everton Robinson, we're discussing his wonderful book, A Child's Guide to Wisdom. Available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, but make sure you're checking out his personal site, achildsguidetowisdom.net. You know, Everton, next question that I'd love to go into, and thank you so much for everything that you've relayed so far. In addition to your own personal experience, what research did you conduct in preparation for this book?
Good question. My principal research was the Bible. I'm an avid student of the Bible, and I'm a minister. And so most of the principles that I use in the book were just the result of either, teaching or preaching, or just my experience with other people as I dealt with other people. Mm-hmm. And of course, I do a lot of reading. I developed a reading habit where my wife and I, we read at least minimum of 15 minutes every day out of a positive mental attitude book.
Absolutely.
And so we've had this habit for over 30 years. Just always reading books that have to do with positive mental attitude, books that have to do with self-image, building the self-image, because one of the biggest things that we found is that most people have low self-image. And so we engaged in reading a lot, and from the reading that we did, we didn't do any specific reading for this book, but from all the reading that we have been doing all along, we were able to pull some of these principles together. But my main source is the Bible. That's where I get a lot of my inspiration.
Who would you say is your intended audience, and what are you hoping that they receive or take from this interview and your book?
My intended audience is parents, the grandparents, the teachers, the preschool directors, people that deal with children. Mm-hmm. And if they would, what I would like to see them do is just use it as a tool, work it into their normal systems, day-to-day systems, so that number one, the child becomes very interested in things having to do with wisdom. Number two, the child learns the principles, and the child then can make wise decisions based on this repetition. It takes time, and it must be intentional. It can't be, oh, well, I'll give you the book, and if you learn it, I'll give you some money. No, it needs to be intentional. And since parents and teachers are a captive audience to the students, then it just makes sense to just work it in as part of their system. And if they do that, I believe the results will be fantastic.
What's next for you, man? What do you have on the horizon? Is there another book on the way? Talk to us a little bit more about what's upcoming.
Two things. I'm putting the principles to rap, because I found that if somebody can put a beat to something, they can learn it better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm putting the principles to rap, and I want to make that available so that as part of the learning process, like in the schools or whatever, they will be able to use that as a tool. Also, I'm working on the second book with another 50 principles. I already have the manuscript down, and it's just a matter of putting it together. But once I've done that, then I have other projects that I have in mind. I'd like to see these principles used in a game with children playing game and having to seeing the definition and having to say what principle it is, or seeing the word and seeing what and coming up with the definition. So just by making it a game, it becomes a part of them, and it can impact their lives into the future.
Listen, I could sit here and I could talk to Everton all day. Okay. A, I'm that engulfed in what he is talking about. B, there's just that much information that we can cover. Listen, there are 50 principles in his book. I think we covered 3, maybe 4. There's so much left to be discovered. I'm going to say it for you once more, even though I know I don't have to, but let's just re-impress it once again. Here on the line with Everton Robinson, we just finished discussing his wonderful self-help book, A Child's Guide to Wisdom. Available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. But make sure you're doing yourself a favor and you're heading over to his personal site, A Child's Guide to Wisdom.net, to get everything that he has in store. And check in frequently, because as he just said, there's another book on the horizon, as well as hopefully a rap that gets constructed around this. And I don't know about you guys, but that's a technique that I had always used, right? I mean, going back to the ABCs, whenever there's a rhythmic pattern behind something, it's amazing how much quicker our minds are to adapting it, right? Because we recognize that pattern. The words then just fall into place. They're like puzzle pieces. And that rhythmic pattern will have a very specific sequence, and those words just automatically fall into place, and it makes it that much easier to learn. So I think what he is about to embark upon is magnificent, and you all need to do yourself a favor and head on over and pick up copies of this book today. It absolutely needs to be on your shelf, and an even better gift for you to put on someone else's. So head on over there and pick it up. You surely will not be disappointed. Everton, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. Such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Benji, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.